Employers of Reddit, what are your crazy employee stories? We have this one relatively crazy woman that works in her shop. She's got a son who at the time of this story was around 16. This woman decides that her son needed some experience sexually with an older woman, so she actually went to one of the women in our accounting department, who was around 60 or so, and asked her if she'd be interested in having sex with her 16-year-old son because she wanted his first time to be with someone experienced. I shit you not, I was sitting outside our HR person's office when the complaint was filed. A few years ago I was a kitchen manager at a place in Charlotte, NC. I don't know if it is common knowledge or not, but drug use in kitchens is very common, and most of the time accepted. That being said, I had a line cook who had come in tweaked out on cocaine. He came to me, explained the situation, apologized, asked if he could run somewhere and come in a little later in better shape. It was slow, and most of the prep was done, so I said he could have an extra hour. He comes back 45 minutes later and is calmed down, stopped shaking and had a grin on his face. He was one of my better line cooks, so I was glad to see that I didn't have to reprimand him. We begin the dinner service and everything is running smoothly when I look across the line and he begins to look as if he's falling asleep while working the grill. He assured me that he was fine. 15 minutes goes by and I see him collapse, landing with his face and arm on the grill. He didn't even wake up. I run across the kitchen and push him off, skin literally melted to the grill. As he hits the ground, he wakes up and simply says, "Aw shoot. Chef, may I go to the hospital?" The smell was horrific. At 7 p.m. on a Friday night we closed the restaurant, opened all the doors and windows and cleaned up the mess. We bought new plates for the grill, don't worry. As I'm doing my order for the next day around 10 p.m., he comes back in, bandaged up, and says, "Chef, can I help with anything?" Astonished, I couldn't reply. And he continued to explain that he went to his dealer's house and got a shoot ton of OxyContin. Snorted it so he could calm down. And he just nodded out. "But it's okay, they gave me morphine so I can still work, and I'm a dumbass, so don't worry about workers' comp, I just want to still have a job." 2 weeks later he returned to work, sober, and hasn't touched a drug or had a drink since. I arranged so that his hospital bills were paid, but he had no paid time off. One of the best employees and craziest motherfuckers I will ever meet. Edit. After seeing how much you guys liked this story, I contacted him. It's been about 3 years. He met his now fiancée at an NA meeting. Expecting a daughter in a few months, and was just called about becoming the sous chef at a restaurant opening in Atlanta. He moved there because he said that Charlotte was too dangerous for him and there were too many haunting memories. Thank you guys so much. It makes me proud. He cried thanking me on the phone when I told him about this, and I would have probably not done so if it weren't for this. Thank you, from the both of us. There was this Asian lady at my first job out of college who would sneak away into the lunchroom, which was in the basement of the building, and steal lunches. She'd go through all of them, taking bites or eating it all. If she took a bite of something she didn't like, she'd throw it in the garbage. Staff would come downstairs to find their lunches devoured or in the trash with one bite taken out of it. This all came to a head one day when some guy was up in arms after his meatloaf sandwich fell victim to the Asian lunch thief. He ended up catching her, she was fired, and keyed everyone's cars. Worked at a new Fry's that opened in my old town a number of years back. It was pretty bad initially and they really overworked employees. The turnover was huge and later a suit was filed against this specific Fry's. In any case, when I started there was a blonde woman who I forget her name now, let's call her Beth. Beth was overly enthusiastic to the point of being incredibly annoying to any and every employee/customer. Beth was apparently also a pathological liar and frequently left her shifts early to do God knows what. When she was fired, she came back with a nice, purple present. All wrapped up with a white bow and everything. It was meant to be an apology to the manager, but she quickly dropped it off and took off saying she was busy. It smelled like it had been doused in a gallon of perfume, but she seemed half crazed, so whatever. The manager for her department at the time took it and opened it near the registers. Inside was a lump of shoot. She sh*t in a box and gave it to her manager. As a gift, of course. Edit: I should clarify that the box was not large, half a foot length and width-wise. There was no smearing or smudging along the box. It was about as neat as you could make a turd in a box. Edit2, it's an odd feeling when your top-rated comment is about someone shooting in a box. Reddit works in mysterious ways. Many years ago I was a lowly production manager of a small team at a graphics shop. One of the dudes on my night shift got pissed at the shop owner, and started taking tidy little shoots on the ceiling tiles, and then placing the tiles back up into the ceiling grid. An odor of POO started permeating the place, and nobody knew where it was coming from. Took weeks, and then we finally discovered his high-altitude shoot minefield. Owner grimly admitted, "I don't pay you enough to take care of this shoot," and broke out the ladder, face mask, rubber gloves, and bucket. TLDR. Shoot grid saboteur made it stink 2 by 2. I work as a supervisor in a drug store. One night one of my employees was seen just letting someone walk out with hundreds of dollars of merchandise. A few minutes later he went outside to collect the shopping carts. I'm reviewing the video evidence of this happening at the time, and on the phone with my store manager. The employee was outside for a pretty decent amount of time. I hadn't noticed right away because I was busy collecting the evidence, but my other cashier called me up and told me that he still hadn't come back in. 15 minutes later. As I walked downstairs, he comes back inside with one shopping cart and the guy was high as a kite. Because I am not a store manager, my hands are rather tied as far as what I am able to do at the time. So I just send him home and keep someone else for the rest of the night. The employee called me later. I happened to be best friends with his sister. And he started talking about how he hates snitches and that people should just leave other people alone. He was rambling on and on. The next day the loss prevention manager was there, as well as my manager. The employee was terminated. It turned out that he would let his friends walk out with baskets of merchandise without scanning it. Then he would go to collect carts and they would give him meth in payment for all the stuff. He thought he had this master plan, and that he was sticking it to the man. It was really sad to see. Since then, the employee has been incarcerated and successfully completed rehab. I am glad to say that he is doing so much better now, and has apologized profusely about the entire incident. We own a salvage yard, junkyard, and we usually have a few cats around. Every now and then one of these cats will claim us and live in the office. We feed it, take it to the vets, and it becomes our junkyard pet cat. One particular cat was awesome and all the guys loved this cat, even the burly guys. They would all share their lunches with the cat. This one guy that used to work for us was a real asshole. One day he decided that he didn't like the cat anymore. He took a can of spray paint and painted the poor kitty all over, head to tail. When the cat came into the office, my husband, who is the boss, went ballistic. The first thing my husband did was wash the cat off as best as he could. Then he went into the shop and raised holy hell, screaming at everyone until a new guy finally told him that he saw Jim spray paint the cat. My husband was raging and wanted to really frock this guy up bad, but instead, called the cops and filed animal cruelty charges and fired him on the spot. This guy had the balls to file for unemployment for unlawful termination. He was denied several times but kept opposing the judgment. We fought his argument all the way to the highest level of state review, where he was granted full unemployment benefits. The reason was, even though he broke the law while at work, it didn't, state in our handbook no spray painting of cats or no unlawful activities at the workplace. We thought that would have been a given. The guy finally got his though, kinda. He's serving a year in jail for fleeing from the police while drunk. The cat lived for several more years. One guy would always come in on Sunday to feed her and he found her dead. She had died in her sleep, in the box filled with blankets that they kept for her. Bob, not his real name, oh God Bob, not his real name. Bob lasted 2 weeks, which was about 2 weeks longer than he should have. During orientation, he challenged me on several of our rules, many of them having to do with health and safety. He did not want to wear eye protection, or closed-toed shoes since it was too hot in our climate-controlled manufacturing plant. He wore a Bluetooth headset which he proceeded to answer several times through orientation. And when informed that personal cell phones use was only permitted during scheduled breaks, he informed me that he was conducting business and needed it. This was when I decided Bob needed to go, however HR and the company president also needed to sign off on it, and after 3 hours decided I had not given him a fair shake. Bob was untrainable. He had one job to do, balance material in a centrifuge and make sure it was draining. We had charts posted outlining how many of what to put in and how to arrange things. So after working with him a day, showing him and overseeing him arrange and balance, was satisfied that I could leave him unattended for 5 minutes while I grabbed a washroom break. I was dead wrong. I start to hear the clanking of metal on metal and run back to shut down the machine to find that it was not loaded or balanced properly. When asked why he loaded it against regulation, he said it takes too long to arrange everything. Still nobody wants to get rid of him except me. So as the GM of a manufacturing plant, I spent the next week with Bob babysitting him as he loaded a centrifuge until I finally had to leave him to do my actual job. In under a half hour, from improper loading, he had damaged the machine. While I was setting up the backup, I instructed him to go to the boardroom to review the loading cart and that I would call him back when I finished. About 20 minutes later, I go to the boardroom, no Bob. There is nobody in the men's room. As I am walking back to my production floor, I notice that there is somebody in the president's office. This is pretty strange since the president is out of the office that day, and the only 2 people who are permitted in the office are myself and the office manager. Wouldn't you know it, just down the hall the office manager is happily chugging away at some reports in her office. So I go in, only to reveal Bob watching some of the most depraved Spanish porn on the president's computer. While I didn't have the power to, I terminated him on the spot and cleared it with HR and the president later, who a quick viewing of his browser history agreed that it was justified. Apparently Bob didn't know how to browse incognito. Bob has since filed a case with HRSDC for wrongful dismissal. I was a supervisor for a high-end retail store that we were preparing for grand opening. We had hired one guy, we'll call him Tom, that was in his early to mid-20s. Over the course of a couple weeks I noticed that I barely ever saw Tom during his shifts after I sent him off to do something. One day I sent him onto the sales floor with a cart of merchandise to stock and realized that it had been over 20 minutes. And all of the other employees had already been back 2 to 3 times. I was the only manager on, so I knew he didn't get sent to another task, so I asked if anyone had seen him. One girl turned to me and said he's probably in his cubby. And then proceeded to show me where it was. Apparently Tom had created a cubby for himself about 3 to 4 feet wide behind some old shelving units. He had stolen a heated blanket, pillow, and various food items off of the sales floor, and that's where he had been hanging out for the majority of his shifts for over a month. Checking in with various managers at 30 to 45-minute intervals so as to be seen by someone. This was his 3rd or 4th offense, so we fired him. He proceeded to rip his shirt in half and start crying while screaming "why?" over and over again at the top of his lungs. We then escorted him out of the building, where he continued screaming and crying while beating his chest and hawking loogies on our windows. This kid was a complete tool. Harassed all of the girls relentlessly, even me, his supervisor. Tried to sell drugs on the premises and stole non-stop. I don't know why he seriously didn't understand why he was being fired. I worked for a big company years ago as the shipping manager. One of the guys I hired was an ex-Russian army guy. He was pretty good, hard worker and all that. Still a little off, if you know what I mean. So one day he doesn't show up and no phone call. The next day he calls me and he sounds like he's high. He's in the hospital. After work I go by the hospital, we were kinda friends, and his whole right side is frocking black as night. Not a stitch of white. Serious bruising. Broken leg and arm. I asked him what the hell happened and he told me that, him and his friends were having party in his 5th floor apartment. He was having an argument with one of his friends, as seemed to be a regular Russian thing for them to do. His friend was saying that he never follows through or something like that. So my friend stated that he always follows through. My friend says if I told you I would jump out that window, I would. His friend says. Ha ha ha, you wouldn't dare. So crazy F***ing Yuri runs and leaps out the window, down onto the parking lot below. He spent over a month in the hospital to prove a point. Frocking ridiculous. He quit and he didn't see or hear him until a year later. He called me on the phone. All drunk telling me I was Jesus. The end. Pretty sure I've told this story before, but it fits. I was working at Get Fiddle Center right out of high school. The turnover rate at a store like that is pretty high. If I remember correctly, I saw 70 new hires in the 2 years I worked there. One guy we hired lasted less than a day. He was introduced to everyone, but on that day every register was occupied. So he was sent into our warehouse to help them do stocking and to learn the computer system. However, as I found out later, it was pretty evident that he was at the very least functionally illiterate. So the warehouse manager gave the guy an X-Acto knife and had him go bust down cardboard boxes. However, after about an hour or so, he couldn't be found. The events that follow I was not directly witness to, just told about after the fact. After searching for this man for a while, he was discovered sitting in a pile of gig bags at the top of one of the warehouse shelves, about 15 feet off the ground, singing softly to himself. Smiling broadly, with tears on his face. And cutting his wrists with the knife. From where I was, all I knew was that the GM and a couple of the AMs got paged to the warehouse, and soon after we heard sirens in our parking lot. The GM, a guy with a bit of a temper, was heard yelling very loudly in his office right afterward, though who he was yelling at, I don't know. Never saw that kid again. I used to be a manager of a gas station and my graveyard gas pumper, who was in his late 40s/early 50s, decided that he gave no frocks anymore one night. He decided to have a local crack whore hang out with him during his whole shift, treated them both to free 40s of bum beer/snacks from the store for free. And used cash from the till to buy meth, which they both snorted on video. Needless to say, he lost his job and I got a good laugh watching the security footage. I work at an East Coast gas station that sells made-to-order food. Most people who call out of work will give some type of legitimate excuse as to why they can't come in, they are sick, etc. One Friday night a third shifters called to say he wasn't coming in that night. His reason? I have a life, and hung up. Employee asked to have Friday off to watch a big darts contest, failed to give nearly enough notice, but what the hell, okay. Phones the boss at home Sunday. I'm through to the third round, which is on Monday. Can I have Monday off? You said you were going to watch a darts contest. Well, yeah, but I wasn't expecting to get past the first round, then I would have been watching after that. Can I have tomorrow off? No, you're needed. It's too short notice. Oh. Okay. Doesn't turn up for work on Monday. In the evening, his girlfriend rings up. Paul's made it through to the fourth round, tomorrow. He asked me to call and say he can't be at work tomorrow. Sorry, but if he isn't at work tomorrow 8 a.m. he needn't bother turning up at all. Doesn't come to work Tuesday. Turns up 8 a.m. Wednesday, and seems genuinely surprised when he is told to get lost, he's fired. Our sales manager had an office. An office with a door that he chose to leave open. He also had a monitor facing the door that could have easily been turned around. And yes, he loved his porn. Everyone here believes he was just stupid. I don't think there's any way he wasn't getting off to people watching him. I've had a few crazy co-workers. The guy that used to show up to work drunk at 9 a.m. then continue to add rum to his beverages all day until he was barely intelligible, usually by noon. Somehow he got away with it for a long time, probably because he was a nice guy overall and did a relatively good job at work. But the balls on that guy. The lady that wore clothes to work that her cats must have been peeing on for months and were never washed. She also wore perfume, which did nothing to mask the scent, so we think she must really not have noticed the smell. It was really awful. We had a small room in the building for our division, about 10 people in a 15x10 room with desks against every wall. It literally made your eyes water. She was actually let go because of this, since people had complained and she refused to do anything about her hygiene. The two ghetto girls who tried to beat me up, I'm a girl, in our office because they hated me. The one girl actually took off her rings, earrings and started unzipping her knee-high boots while screaming that she was going to kick my ass in the office and she didn't give a shit about her job. I literally laughed in her face until I couldn't breathe. Needless to say, she and her cohort were both gone soon afterwards. We used to sing "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'" every time the aggressive girl would walk by, until she was fired, about 2 weeks later. The guy who added every coworker on Facebook after his first day, complete with a private message saying something like, "I'm not a creep, let's just be friends so I can see all your pictures." His FB name, instead of his real name being displayed, was a reference to cocaine. I won't say it in case he still has it up, and he had multiple photo albums of dead animals and himself holding guns. I never added him, but someone else did and showed everyone. Upon hiring, he apparently immediately whipped out his cell phone in front of some of my co-workers and started telling a friend that he was going to be tested for cocaine, and OMG, what was he going to do? He also couldn't handle any tax without freaking out. I mean anything from talking to a customer, phone sales, to even being asked to refill the copier. Somehow he lasted 6 months or so before his behavior got so weird that they let him go. We were convinced that he would show up with a gun after that, but we never saw him again. The woman who was a compulsive liar. Here are some of her best tales. She was married to a Middle Eastern prince. Nope, was really rich and just worked. Oh, have something to do, not really. Told the entire office I was a cocaine addict because I got promoted to a position that she wanted. I'm fat. Have you ever seen a fat cokehead? Regardless, I certainly was not using cocaine at all, and there was no reason to believe I was other than allergies that made my nose run. Once people started calling her out on her lies, she immediately developed uterine cancer. Disappeared from work and told people she had an emergency total hysterectomy and was beginning chemo treatments. Some people fell for it, but everyone soon found out that it was not true. The company asked her for medical proof of her long absences from work and she could not provide any, which is ridiculous. For someone who supposedly had a hysterectomy and was undergoing chemo. Unfortunately, this was after an office pool was taken up to help her with her expenses during her purported illness, and many people were very upset about her taking money from us under false pretenses. I did not donate, as I knew for a fact she was a compulsive liar, nor did most people in our department because they were aware as well. She kept the money and refused to answer anyone's phone calls after this incident. She was fired for missing so much work with no medical excuse. My former female manager, who would mock everyone around her for eating typical lunch fare sandwiches, fast food, pizza, etc. because she was on a diet. She would sit at her desk and eat a salad with tons of cheese, bacon, and dressing on it and bitch about how hard it was for her to lose weight. She wasn't dumb at all, she just didn't seem to understand that a salad isn't healthy if you put fattening things on it, no matter what literature we showed her to help her eat healthier. The customer service rep dude who literally faked every piece of work he was supposedly doing for over 6 months and then was shocked when he was fired. The sad part is I think he spent more time faking evidence of doing work that he would have spent while actually doing the work. He also was a DJ, but had no DJ equipment and insisted that putting together playlists on his iPod to be played at the local bar's DJ night. They let people make a playlist of a few songs to be played over the bar's stereo system. It's pretty fun actually, made him a DJ. The girl that was hired on a friend's recommendation, showed up first day of work, accepted the company manual, and was told to read it for a while and someone would be with her very shortly to begin training. She immediately proceeded to lay the manual on her desk, put her head down and go to sleep. I don't mean she accidentally fell asleep while reading it. I wrote half of the manual. It's really boring unfortunately, so I couldn't blame her if that were the case. I mean, we watched her sit down and settle in for a nap. She actually swore at the manager who woke her up for interrupting her sleep, and then stormed out after being told that she would no longer be needed at the company, with the manual. Maybe it was a really comfy pillow? The mid-40s lady who lived alone with her 2 cats in a studio apartment 2 blocks from the job, but refused to walk to the office. She would always ask people for money so she could take a cab to work, including a stop at the Dunkin' Donuts 1 block from the office so she could get coffee. The girl who was hired 2 weeks before the company holiday party, dinner and open bar at a nice Italian place we had many company functions at, good times. Spent the whole 2 weeks before sucking up to everyone horribly. She was not good at it, not even a little, and generally just being annoying and incompetent at her job. When she got to the party, she got shit-faced 30 minutes in and proceeded to spend the rest of the night buying people drinks, at an open bar, and interrupting the big boss toast. Let's just say that was a really bad idea. The culmination of the night was her offering a shot she bought to one of the senior managers, who shoved it back at her and said, "Honey, you know we are paying for all these drinks, right? When I want a drink, I'll get myself one since I'm footing the bill." Priceless. The Russian IT guy who spoke 3 languages and would sometimes get flustered during times of stress and start mixing all 3 languages into his sentence. Usually he would stop, think for a second, yell "frog," then walk out and come back when he was more composed and could stick to one language at a time. That was more funny than crazy though. I manage a pet store and, after much investigation and surveillance, had to fire an employee for eating dog treats. While I wasn't an employer, I worked for the personnel office. Someone asked me where the applications were and I pointed to a table. The girl came back because she had trouble filling it out. Apparently, she was filling out archaic order forms that were placed next to the job applications. I worked with a guy who brought 2 gallons of what I thought was sweet tea every day to work. We stocked the milk section together and he would always disappear, but I didn't care. Turns out he would drink 2 gallons of Long Island sweet tea and surround himself with milk crates and sleep. Setup. In the next town there was a workplace shooting that ended up being a murder, suicide. Very tragic. The next week we announced that there is going to be a layoff of 10 out of 160 people. One of the best, most capable, and most valuable people in the shop announces in the lunchroom that if his name was on the layoff list, he is going to shoot up the place just like what happened in the other town. He never made the list as he was taken out of work by the police and terminated for cause. The sad part was he would have never been laid off. Crazy Robert, where do I begin? I'm an auto mechanic at a small shop. 3 techs, and 1 oil change bitch/shuttle driver, Robert. This guy is a 55-year-old 12-year-old. For the past 30 years he has literally done nothing but smoke weed, drink beer, and bang hookers, literally, every day. He used to come to work hungover and that was fine, because he kept to himself being hungover. About a year ago he married a 78-year-old woman, who sort of took him in as a pet. She made him quit all the hookers, drugs, and booze, and shortly afterwards he spiraled into a depression. Then he just disappeared. No phone call or nothing, just split. 4 months later he just shows back up for work one day like nothing happened. I shoot you not, just strolls in and is all okay, I'm back. Apparently his new wife is loaded and has some big-time lawyers and doctors, so somehow they found some medical loophole and we literally can't fire him. Bullshit. So now he's been seeing all these doctors who have diagnosed him with everything from manic depressive to schizophrenia, ADHD, etc., and now he's on all sorts of crazy pills. Since then he's been out of control. Had one person call and say they were ran off the road by our shuttle van. Had another call and report our shuttle going down the highway at 30 miles per hour, in a 70, with both feet out the driver's window while talking on his cell phone. That guy emailed the manager pics. He once told a story of when he moved out of his apartment and left his shower pal in the shower. He told this in the lobby, in front of almost a dozen customers. One customer asked what a shower pal was, which Robert explained was a rubber pussy and asshole with a suction cup on the back, which he would stick to the wall and frock while he was in the shower. OMFG. One day Robert got news that the lot lizard died, his favorite hooker. Spent a week literally man sobbing every 5 minutes. Turns out she died of syphilis. Also turns out that she gave it to Robert and it's been slowly eating away his brain for the last 30 years. Well, that explains the crazy. There's also a crazy sister, that he always talks about killing because she's such a bitch. He's asked me twice if I'll come to his funeral. Did I mention that on more than one occasion he's brought a gun to work, because people are out to fucking waste me? When he was diagrammed as crazy he had to sign the forms giving up his guns, but his wife keeps buying him more because they're the only thing that makes him happy. And apparently we still can't fire him. A 50-year-old coworker I knew was the sweetest lady ever. She was constantly cleaning, and often felt distressed that she wasn't doing enough. One day, a guest complained to our resort safety department that she was driving dangerously to work. When he confronted her, she took off her shirt, in the coffee shop, and started yelling at him in just her bra and old lady boobs. Hope she's found help since. I worked for a plant company over the summer that supplied to a large hardware store. I did perennials, and another company handled the annuals. There was a girl who did the annuals that I actually liked talking to a lot. She was nice, and we shared in our hatred of hot weather and assholes. She was an extremely hard worker, but her supervisor was a douchebag. I hated having to talk to him because he just came off as a giant ass, holier-than-thou person all the time. During the summer the girl announces she's pregnant and us perennial girls are like, ah, good for you, congratulations. Apparently this didn't sit so well with her supervisor, as he had a bit of a thing for her. He was being douchier than usual to her and he berated her in front of customers. The hardware store managers had to intervene to get the guy to leave, and the poor girl was in tears. That clears up and suddenly they're buddy-buddy again. He has a wedding to go to and he wanted to take the girl as his date. She goes with him. At this point my employment with the company was up, seasonal, so I parted ways with everyone. About 3 days later, my boyfriend's mom, who is a supervisor of the plant company, calls me and tells me the girl was murdered by her supervisor in the hotel room they were staying at for the wedding. She was 6 months pregnant. He strangled her, and to top it all off, had sex with her dead body. I can't even drive by that store without getting chills. I always knew there was something off about him, but holy shoot. It hit me hard. I had only just talked to her. I suppose I should admit that I just spent the last 20 minutes of work reading this thread instead of working.